The first thing they taught you in Earth Command was never to beg. Not when you were outnumbered, not when they had their plasma barrels pressed against your jaw, and not when they tore your ship apart while laughing in their alien dialects. You keep your teeth clenched, your back straight, and your finger on the trigger. Because Earth doesn't beg. Not anymore. Commander Holt stared at the holomap flickering on the war room wall. 12 Imperial dreadnoughts, 49 cruiser-class vessels, hundreds of parasite drones forming a net around the outer moons of Mars, all of them bearing the seal of the Dravari Empire, that cursed multi-species confederation of slavers, executioners, and hypocrites who had once called humanity a species unfit for autonomy. Holt clenched his jaw. They crossed the line. No one in the room disagreed. No one dared to. Earth's ban on the Empire wasn't a diplomatic sanction. It was a final warning. After the Dravari launched a preemptive strike on Europa Station, killing over 40,000 civilian engineers and miners, the ban was announced through a one-line transmission. Cross the line, face Oblivion. The Empire laughed. Of course they did. They'd ruled the stars for 2 millennia. They'd broken rebellions on 7 worlds, sterilized populations for daring to want freedom, and turned entire planets into labor camps. To them, Earth was still that broken, fragile world at the edge of the stars, a survivor of its own greed, barely crawling into space. They didn't know what Earth had become in the shadows. No more appeals, no more groveling before the Galactic Senate that ignored human cries for justice. The ban meant something now. It meant Earth had learned how to build ships that didn't blink under EMP storms. It meant we had weapons designed not to disable, but to vaporize fleets. And it meant we had men, real men, trained not for politics or parades, but for vengeance. "Deploy the Bastion line," Holt ordered. "Are you sure?" General Maris asked, eyes darting to the others. "We use that. There's no walking back." "We're not walking back," Holt said, his voice low. "We're erasing every trace of their arrogance." He turned toward the men gathered, hardened tacticians, veterans of the border skirmishes, survivors of the Vex insurgency. None of them wore medals. Earth Command didn't believe in decoration. You either came back breathing, or you didn't. And if you came back limping, you earned silence, not pity. All Bastion-class warships are to enter the suppression grid and execute Protocol Scorch. We give them one warning, one. After that, we reduce their command chain to slag. One of the younger captains, Rico, asked the obvious question. "What about survivors?" Holt didn't blink. There won't be survivors. The silence that followed wasn't hesitation. It was respect. Because when Earth declared the Empire banned, we meant every damn word. In the cold darkness of space, aboard the Empire's flagship Nalara, Admiral Korik chuckled as he sipped his blue liquor. "Humans are melodramatic. They bark, but their teeth are dull." He waved at the Earth fleet moving into range. "Look at them. Primitive designs, angular hulls, overcompensation for something." His second-in-command, a reptilian hybrid named Searle, hissed nervously. "Sir, their formation. It's not standard. This isn't a defense grid." Korik raised a brow. "You fear prey now?" Searle didn't answer, because the prey was no longer running. Within minutes, Earth's ships began their assault. But it wasn't a barrage. It wasn't chaos. It was clinical, precise, efficient. The first Scorch protocol activated, neutron torpedoes slicing through the Empire's shielding like it was paper. Ionic wave bursts disabled their command comms. AI-guided railguns focused fire on every ship with a high-value target on board. The dreadnought, glorious Vrax exploded before it could charge its main cannon. The cruiser Thalsar broke in half, spilling screaming soldiers into the void. There were no warning shots, no second chances. Earth had banned the Empire. And this was the price. Blood always looks the same in zero gravity. That's what they used to say in covert training. Doesn't matter if it's alien or human. Once it's floating in a ruptured cabin, globules spinning like dead stars, it loses identity, loses meaning. You either keep moving or you join the mess. Commander Holt stood silently aboard the ECS Revenant, the flagship leading Earth's counterstrike. Through the reinforced viewport, he watched as flaming wreckage spiraled across Martian orbit, fragments of what used to be the Dravarai 6th Fleet. The Empire had lost more ships in the past 6 hours than in the last 3 centuries, and they weren't retreating. They were panicking. The comms buzzed behind him. "Sir, we're receiving a long-range hail from the Empire's Admiralty, encrypted, marked diplomatic priority." Holt turned slowly. "Decline it." The officer hesitated. "Sir?" "I said decline?" Holt's voice dropped an octave. "There are no negotiations. Not anymore." The comm officer tapped the console, and the Empire's message, likely a plea for ceasefire, maybe even an apology masked in bureaucratic language, vanished into digital ash. He couldn't stomach their words. Not after what happened at Europa. Not after the images they all saw. Children fused to bulkhead walls. Engineers incinerated mid-broadcast, screaming into dead air while their oxygen leaked away. The Empire called it a miscalculated strike. Holt called it a deliberate massacre. And now they were paying. "Status on the Bastion line?" he asked. "Fully deployed," said General Maris, stepping up beside him. "We've locked their outer rim defenses in a crossfire pattern. Drone clusters moving in. Our AI projection estimates full grid lockdown in under 20 minutes. Any Earth losses?" Maris checked his display. 4 cruisers. Moderate casualties. Holt nodded. Acceptable. It didn't make him feel better. Losses were losses, each death a thread yanked from the tattered flag of humanity's future. But Earth had made peace with sacrifice. The Dravari never expected that. Empires thrive on compliance, not resolve. They conquered with fear. But Earth had outgrown fear. Earth had learned hate. Across the void, in the shattered remains of the Nalara, Admiral Korik coughed up a lungful of iridescent blood. His once imposing frame now slumped against a melted control panel, his ceremonial armor torn and bloodied. The bridge was gone. Half his officers were gone. Some still floated outside, frozen in death, limbs outstretched as if still reaching for salvation. "Searle!" he rasped. The reptilian aide limped toward him, half his face burnt, one arm missing. "Admiral, they've disabled our command chain. The network is gone. We're blind." Korik swallowed hard. "How did this happen?" Cyril didn't answer. The truth was already carved into their eyes. They'd underestimated Earth. For generations, the Empire had monitored human advancement with arrogance. They saw Earth's civil wars, political instability, environmental collapses, and scoffed. "Too emotional," they'd said. "Too chaotic. Too weak to unify." But humanity did unify. Not through peace, not through treaties, through vengeance, through shared scars, through the burning memory of being treated as less than. "They've evolved past us," Searle whispered. "Not biologically, strategically, psychologically. They don't just want to win. They want to end us," Korik finished. Back aboard the Revenant, Holt walked the dim corridors alone. Not out of solitude, but out of ritual. He always walked the ship after the first kill wave, to remember, to stay grounded. Every war had a beginning, and he never let himself forget the cost. He passed the infirmary first, medics working in silence, sealing wounds, replacing limbs. There was no wailing, no prayers, just pain and protocol. Further down the hall, he passed the engineering wing. Sparks rained from open conduits as teams worked double time, reinforcing hull sections, stabilizing life support. Even the AI assistants had a tired edge to their voices. And finally he stopped at the memorial bay. This was where the bodies were stored until returned to Earth, if they ever made it back. Some were already wrapped, sealed in gray polymer, tags embedded in the chest. No pomp, no trumpets. He knelt near one. Private Callan Veras, age 19, fire control technician. Barely more than a boy. Joined out of vengeance, parents killed in the Mars riots sparked by an Empire-fueled food collapse. "You made them pay," Holt whispered. "That's more than most get." He stood slowly, jaw tight. Back on the bridge, another message pulsed through the emergency channel. Urgent. Civilian massacre in Calra Fath Colony. Holt's fists tightened. He scanned the brief. The Empire, in desperation, had launched a retaliatory assault on one of Earth's fringe settlements. No strategic value, no military presence, just farmers, children, over 12,000 dead. No survivors. "They're losing," Maris said grimly, reading the same report. "And like all tyrants, they're lashing out at the weak." "Good," Holt muttered. Maris raised a brow. "Good. It makes what comes next easier." Holt turned toward the main war table. A new operation was already taking shape. One Earth had kept under Black Seal authorization. Until now. Project Iron Howl. A full-spectrum orbital saturation. Thermonuclear strikes backed by kinetic dusting and biochemical sterilization drones. The target wasn't a fleet or a base. It was the Empire's homeworld, Draxion Prime. "Launch it," Holt said. Maris didn't flinch. "No evacuation window?" There were no evacuation windows at Europa, or Calra 5. For a second, there was silence. Then Maris nodded. Understood. 6 hours later, the Iron Howl protocol began. Draxion Prime never stood a chance. First came the sky-darkening kinetic rods. Iron slugs dropped from orbit at terminal velocity, turning cities to ash in a blink. Then came the firestorms. Chain-reactive thermobaric detonations spread through atmospheric pressure bombs. Entire continents burst into hellscapes. And finally, the sterilizers, drones that flew low, scanning for survivors. They didn't bomb. They didn't shoot. They simply sprayed a mist that melted bone within minutes. It was not a battle. It was extinction. Somewhere, deep within the Empire's final military bastion, surviving officers screamed for answers, cursed the void, begged for surrender. But no one answered their calls. Because Earth had banned the Empire. And now Earth was burning their name from the stars. In a silent chamber aboard the Revenant, Holt stood watching the feed. No joy, no pride, just a deep, burning finality. He hadn't become a soldier to make war. None of them had. They were made by war, shaped by loss, betrayal, humiliation. "We were the monsters they made," he muttered. Behind him, Maris spoke softly. "The Galactic Senate is panicking. Other empires are calling for ceasefires, joint coalitions, apologies." Holt turned. "Tell them Earth isn't interested." "They're scared." They should be. And somewhere on a distant outpost, a small alien child watched her screen as the last Empire transmission faded to black. Her father, a former diplomat, stood silently behind her, tears dripping into the floor. "Papa," she whispered, "why is Earth so angry?" He didn't answer at first. Then finally, in a voice as fragile as broken glass, because we taught them that mercy was weakness. And now mercy was gone. The galaxy didn't sleep after Draxion Prime fell. For the first time in known history, the capital world of a major empire was annihilated without warning, without negotiation, and without survivors. News of the purge traveled faster than light-speed relays, spreading terror like a virus. Star systems that once saluted the Dravari banner lowered their flags overnight. Colonies abandoned posts. Political alliances shattered like glass under a boot. But Earth didn't broadcast their victory. There were no speeches, no declarations of dominance, just silence. And in that silence, fear grew louder. Commander Holt sat alone in the ECS Revenant's briefing chamber, the lights dimmed low. His hands rested on the edge of the steel table, calloused fingers twitching with the ghosts of decisions already made. He hadn't slept since Iron Howl launched, not because of guilt. Guilt was a luxury. He didn't sleep because the war wasn't over. You don't burn a world and expect forgiveness. You burn a world because you never want to see that flag fly again. The door hissed open. General Maris stepped inside, a data slate in hand and a look of quiet dread on his face. "We've received transmissions from 8 different systems," he said, not bothering with small talk. 3 are pledging allegiance to Earth. 4 are demanding humanitarian support. One's threatening a retaliation if we don't stand down. Holt raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. The Yerex Alliance?" Maris nodded. "They're calling the Draxion strike a war crime. They've already issued a warrant for your arrest." Holt gave a short, humorless laugh. "Let them come. They'll break on our hull like the rest." But Maris didn't smile. "We're not invincible, Holt. The more we escalate, the more desperate the galaxy gets. Desperate people make reckless decisions." Holt stood, eyes cold. "Good. Let them gather. Let them unite. If they want a reckoning, Earth is done whispering. We'll write our truth in fire." Maris hesitated before handing over the slate. "There's one more thing. Surveillance drones picked up an unregistered signal on the edge of the Cephian Fringe, remote asteroid sector. It's not Empire, not known space. Something different." "Another enemy?" "We don't know. But whatever it is, it's watching us." Light years away, in a hollowed-out moon orbiting a red dwarf star, the remaining leaders of the shattered Dravari Empire gathered for a meeting unlike any other. Gone were the flowing robes, the jeweled implants, the ceremonial blades. What stood in that cold room were refugees, cowards, war criminals, and terrified remnants. High Executor Varn stepped forward, his body riddled with surgical replacements from his near-death escape from Draxion Prime. "They're not just killing us," he growled, voice rasping through a modulator. "They're unmaking us. Do you understand what that means?" The room remained silent. "They don't want tribute. They don't want submission. Earth wants erasure. Our history, our language, our gods. Gone." "But they're human," said a frail diplomatic aide. "We raised them, nurtured them into the galactic community. We gave them jump tech. And now they use it to slit our throats." Another voice, young, nervous. "We could sue for peace, offer reparations, a gesture of atonement." Varn slammed his fist into the table. "Earth doesn't believe in reparations. They believe in revenge, and they're better at it than we ever were." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Varn lowered his voice. "There is only one path left. We need a new weapon, something they don't expect, something even Earth hasn't prepared for." A whisper stirred the room. "Project Idolon." Eyes turned, some in horror, some in awe. It had been buried long ago, a failed genetic weapon program, forbidden by galactic law for its cruelty. You would unleash that thing? Someone gasped. We're past morality, Varn said coldly. Earth taught us that. Back aboard the Revenant, Holt stood in the central command tower, watching stars drift through reinforced glass. He didn't feel like a hero. He never had. He thought about Europa again. His brother's voice screaming in the background as oxygen vented from the station, audio scrambled by static and fire. He thought about the political broadcasts afterward, the Dravari ambassador insisting it was an unfortunate error in targeting protocols. Error. That word had haunted him. You don't make an error that precisely wipes out civilians while leaving military assets untouched. That wasn't war. That was a message, a warning to Earth to stay in its place, and Earth's answer had been fire. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Commander, Maris's voice came through the comm. We've just detected an energy spike in the Cephian fringe, unknown signature. Holt leaned forward. Weapons? None yet. But there's something else. It's jamming half our recon feeds, including encrypted relays. That's impossible tech. Put it on the main screen. Moments later, the screen flickered to life, a grainy feed showing a dark void rippling like water, something shifting inside it. Then, slowly, a shape began to emerge. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't anything recognizable. It looked like bone. A massive skeletal structure curled around a pulsating black mass. No lights, no engines, just a silent, dying heartbeat. What the hell is that? Maris whispered. Holt didn't speak. He was already moving, issuing orders. Wake the Council. Mobilize Titan units. Full-scale alert. I want every Earth defense grid active in the next 30 minutes. You think it's a threat? No, Holt said grimly. I think it's the last card they have. The thing in the fringe didn't move at first, but the longer Earth watched, the clearer it became that it wasn't dead. It was waiting. And then it began to speak. Not with words, not with frequencies. It invaded minds. Dozens of Earth operatives collapsed with seizures. Some began muttering in alien tongues. One screamed until his throat tore open. Psych teams were useless. This wasn't technology. This was ancient, biological, cosmic. A weapon born from madness. Maris called it what it was. A god killer. It's not meant to fight fleets, he said, pale. It's meant to erase civilizations. But Earth had already made its choice. They didn't kneel. They didn't parley. They prepared. In the hidden war labs beneath Earth's surface, places where sunlight never touched and laws meant nothing. Old contingency plans were reactivated. Project Revenant Core. The concept was simple. Merge a dying soldier's mind with an AI battle frame. Human emotion, machine calculation, rage without pause, conscience severed. They'd only ever made one. It had gone rogue. Now they needed it back. Deep inside a forgotten asteroid vault, buried beneath layers of fail-safes, Earth's deadliest creation opened its eyes. No name, no rank, just a purpose. Holt stood before the armored shell, watching as the figure inside stirred from cryo. You're not a man anymore, he said quietly. You're not human. The thing looked up, eyes glowing cold silver. I wasn't human when they murdered my family, it replied. Holt nodded once. Then make them remember. The war wasn't over. It had just evolved. What had begun as vengeance was now a war for dominance. Earth had broken the empire, but something darker was awakening, something even older than empires. And humanity, for all its rage, would soon learn the cost of being feared. Because when you erase your enemies, you erase the balance. The thing in the Cephian fringe had no name, not in any language spoken by the Empire or Earth. It existed before names, before speech. It wasn't created. It had simply endured, waiting like rot in the foundation of a dead empire's pride. The Dravari called it Project Idolon, though the name was more for their own comfort than for identification. They thought they could control it. They were wrong. It didn't respond to commands. It responded to pain. And after Earth's genocide of Draxion Prime, it awoke with hunger. On the ECS Revenant, every surface buzzed with activity. No soldier rested. No station stood idle. The crew had moved beyond standard war protocol. They were in survival mode now. Even the AI cores sounded strained, their logic circuits stretched to capacity from the computational strain of analyzing the fringe anomaly. Commander Holt stared at the full scan for the 5th time in an hour. The mass that had risen from the Cephian void now stretched over 400 kilometers in width. Its outer edges seemed to shift in ways space wasn't meant to allow, rippling through subspace like it was water. One moment it appeared dead, the next it felt aware. "Still no comms?" he asked, not expecting a new answer. "No, sir," Maris confirmed. "Nothing translatable, but we've detected psychic interference." Holt turned slowly. "Explain." "The probe units we sent, their handlers are reporting shared hallucinations, waking dreams, mental ruptures. It's not broadcasting in hertz, Commander. It's broadcasting in fear." Holt's jaw tightened. "And it's moving?" "Not exactly. It doesn't use thrusters, but yeah, it's getting closer. And the closer it gets, the more the crew reports headaches, nosebleeds, nightmares. Pull the crew back." "We already did." They're still hearing it. That's when the main alert sounded. Not a standard alarm, but one only used in theoretical doomsday protocol. Revenant core detached. Unauthorized launch. "What?" Holt barked. "The AI host. He's moving without clearance," someone shouted. "Where?" "Toward the fringe. Toward the Idolon." Down in the black void between systems, Earth's last weapon, the Revenant Core Unit 01, cruised alone. No escort, no human operator. Just rage. Inside the titanium-clad shell was no longer a man, but something that once was. Captain Ryland Hart. 20 years ago, he volunteered for Project Revenant, after his wife and son were among the first casualties in the Empire's psychological warfare campaign. Not killed in combat, but used as examples in a broadcasted execution. He'd asked for vengeance. Earth had given him the tools. Now he was part ghost, part machine, part fury. And something inside him resonated with the Idolon. As he drifted closer, his neural interface trembled, not from malfunction, but from recognition. He felt it before he saw it. That thing wasn't just alive. It was aware, and worse, it understood him. "You are like me," it whispered into his skull. He clenched his fists, servo motors whirring under alloyed skin. "No," he growled. "I'm worse." He activated his payload, the Helios detonator, a core-grade fission warhead designed to burn a small moon into vapor. And still, the thing didn't flinch. Instead, it responded. Not with weapons, not with shielding, but with memory. Ryland's HUD warped. Suddenly, he was in his son's bedroom. The light from the lamp glowed warm on the floor. His wife's laughter echoed from the hallway. A toy ship lay abandoned on the floor. "No," he gasped. "This isn't real." The Idolon didn't speak in words. It invaded. It hijacked neural patterns, not just to attack, but to remind. It flooded him with everything he'd lost, everything he'd buried. It broke open the coffin of his grief and poured it into his mind. He screamed. In space, no one could hear it. Back on the Revenant, alarms flared. "Core unit's vitals are spiking. Feedback loops destabilizing. Neural collapse imminent. Pull him out, Holt snapped. We can't. He's locked the sync node. A technician slammed his fist into the console. He's trying to fight it. Maris stood frozen. Then he's already lost. But Ryland Hart didn't die. He did something worse. He merged. The warframe stopped drifting. It shifted, adapted, began to glow, not with Earth's tech, but with something far older, darker. The Idolon wrapped itself around the core, not as a weapon, but as a shell. A cocoon. A new being was forming, and Earth felt it. Inside Earth High Command, red alerts flickered across every continent. Satellite feeds died. Communications scrambled. Civilian networks choked under the pressure of billions trying to understand what was happening. They didn't know the name Idolon, but they knew fear. Children screamed in their sleep, drawing symbols they shouldn't have known. Old men wept at phantom voices, and in the streets of New Europe, a man walked into traffic muttering, "It's already here." Holt stood at the center of the chaos. "We've lost Ryland," Maris said. "No," Holt whispered. "We unleashed him." Maris's voice dropped. "Sir, we may have created something worse than the Empire ever did." "Then we finish what we started." Operation Final Echo was the last contingency. It wasn't designed to win a war. It was designed to stop the end of everything. It involved quantum destabilizers, atmosphere burners, soul scrub tech, the kind of weapons banned by every race that ever reached the stars. Earth had kept it secret, because Earth never trusted peace. "We fire the Omega Lance," Holt ordered. Maris stared. "That'll tear a hole in subspace across half the sector." "We're past saving sectors." "And if it doesn't kill him?" Holt turned, his eyes hollow. "Then we pray we're not the last ones left." They launched it at 0300 hours. A single black cylinder, sleek, silent, shimmering with anti-reality. It wasn't aimed at the Idolon. It was aimed at space itself. The moment it detonated, everything warped. Time bent, stars cried, and the thing that Ryland had become, half human, half something else, screamed in agony across every human mind still breathing. It didn't die, but it was wounded. The fringe collapsed in on itself, becoming a black zone, a void where no light escaped, a place even Earth's machines refused to scan. Silence returned, but not peace. 3 weeks later, Earth sent out a broadcast. Short, cold, final. "The Empire is gone. The Idolon is silenced. The cost is paid. Let none speak of dominion again." The galaxy listened, and stayed quiet. But in deep space, somewhere beyond light, the thing that once was Ryland Hart drifted in the dark, not dead, not alive. Watching. Waiting. And Earth, for all its might, began to wonder, did we win, or did we wake something worse? The galaxy remembered silence differently after Earth's retaliation. Once, silence meant peace, a treaty signed, a war averted, a people spared. But now silence was the pause before the hammer dropped, before orbital firestorms turned cities to dust, before a shadow like the Idolon whispered memories into your bones. And Earth had become the new god of that silence. Every border station, every trade hub, every outpost once loyal to the Dravari Empire now carried a different protocol. No warships near Earth-controlled space, no diplomatic interference, no surveillance, no protests. Because those who protested didn't get warnings anymore. They vanished, not in some political purge or trial court. They simply stopped existing, one by one. Commander Holt stood on the highest platform of Earth's orbital fortress, Bastion 1, staring into the void. Behind him, planet Earth looked smaller than it used to, not because of distance, but because of what they had become. Humanity wasn't crawling anymore. It had risen, tall, proud, unblinking, and feared. The Strategic Council had wanted him to step down after Final Echo detonated in the Cephian Fringe. They said he was compromised, emotionally volatile, unstable. They were right. But Earth didn't need diplomats anymore. It needed monsters who understood the price of power. General Maris stepped beside him, datapad in hand. "Request from the Galactic Senate," he said without looking up. "What do they want now?" "Formal review. They want to open dialogue about accountability regarding use of forbidden weapons." Holt almost laughed. "Let them draft their little notes. Send them paper. We send wreckage." Maris frowned. "Some think we've gone too far." "We had to go too far. And now we're alone." Holt looked at him. "Number we're above." He turned and walked toward the operations chamber. "What about the Fringe?" "Still uninhabitable. Subspace radiation is off the charts. No contact. No probes returned." "No signs of Ryland?" Maris hesitated. "None." But they both knew that didn't mean he was gone. You don't bury what never wanted to live again. Meanwhile, on the former Dravari colony of Zaris 7, a new type of fear was setting in. The planet had been spared Earth's wrath only because it surrendered preemptively, turning over their defense grid and dismantling their fleet before the first warning shot. But surrender hadn't saved them from change. Earth's overseer units had arrived weeks ago, faceless, expressionless, clad in jet-black armor. They didn't speak unless they needed to. They monitored, logged, judged. Their presence wasn't for protection. It was a message. You live under our eye now. Terrell, a former sub-commander in the Dravari Regional Guard, sat in a converted food hall, trying to keep his hands from shaking as he ate synthetic rations. His old uniform was buried in ash, his medals long melted. And yet, the shame wouldn't stop crawling up his throat. "We ruled 50 systems," he muttered to no one. "We had pride." The man across from him, a human contractor named Dael, didn't look up, just kept chewing his food, mechanical jaw clicking softly. "You ruled 50 systems," Dael said, "and you let kids suffocate on Europa. Now you eat what we give you." Terrell's eyes narrowed. "We didn't order that strike." Dael met his gaze, finally. "But you didn't stop it either." Terrell opened his mouth to reply, but then he saw the shadow. An overseer was standing outside the hall's entrance, watching. Terrell lowered his head and went silent. Because on Zaris 7, words were just as dangerous as weapons. Back on Earth, a secret meeting convened under the icy crust of Antarctica, in a chamber known only to Earth's oldest intelligence committee, Section Black. 7 men sat at a circular table. No titles, no insignias, just scars and memories. Holt stood before them. "You told us the Idolon was gone," one of them said. "It is, contained, sealed in the Fringe." "And Ryland?" Holt's eyes flicked with something cold. "He's not our concern." Another voice chimed in. "You merged an unstable warframe with an ancient alien horror, and he's not our concern?" Holt didn't answer. He didn't need to. Another leaned forward. "There are whispers, Commander. Signals at the edge of System L91. Unnatural quantum readings. Similar to the Fringe, but moving." That got his attention. "Moving?" "Yes. Headed toward the Sovereign sector. Toward neutral space." "Any proof it's him?" "No." "Then stop the whispers. Or Earth will." But the whispers didn't stop. Because Ryland was moving, not with ships, not with engines, but with thought. The Idolon had changed him, bonded with him in a way even Earth's science hadn't predicted. He was no longer a man of flesh or code. He was something beyond both. He had seen memories that belonged to stars. He had heard screams that lasted longer than galaxies. And now he had purpose again. But it wasn't vengeance. It was judgment. He drifted toward neutral space, a sector untouched by empire, free of Earth's eye, populated by drifters, traders, and colonies that refused to pick a side. Perfect. He landed on Iridia, a planet barely mentioned on star maps, known more for its smugglers than its laws. The moment he stepped onto the soil, people screamed, not because they saw him, but because they felt him. Fear like a second heartbeat, voices like sand in the skull, time itself bending like cheap metal, and Ryland walked through it all, silent. He wasn't here to conquer. He was here to offer a warning, one sentence broadcast across all systems in the sector. Earth made me a weapon. You made me a myth. But I am now something worse. I am the end of both. Back on the Revenant, Holt heard the signal and felt something he hadn't in years. Cold. Not from fear, from memory. Ryland's voice hadn't aged, hadn't distorted. It was calm, focused, measured, and that was the part that made Holt's blood freeze. Maris stood beside him. Orders? Send a kill team. Maris hesitated. To a neutral sector? That's not sanctioned. Neither is what Ryland is. Commander. Holt didn't flinch. If we don't erase him, someone else will try, and they'll fail. Then we'll have more of him. And in a whisper, as if confessing to the void, I created this thing, and I'll be the one to bury it. The kill team, 5 elite ghost operatives, trained in zero-signal warfare, deployed within the hour. They didn't carry flags. No one knew their names. Earth called them null blades. They didn't bring justice. They brought finality. And they weren't ready. The moment they touched ground on Iridia, they began to die. Not from bullets, from truth. Each one lived through the death of a world. One burned alive in his own memory. Another relived every kill he'd made until he tore out his own eyes. Only one made it to Ryland. He raised his rifle, screaming, "In the name of Earth!" But Ryland just looked at him, and he stopped breathing. No wound, just absence. Back aboard the Revenant, Holt waited for the final transmission. It never came. Just silence. And for the first time, he whispered something no soldier of Earth had dared since the war began. What have we done? Because Ryland wasn't the enemy anymore. He was a mirror, and Earth didn't like what it saw. Rain fell in a steady sheet over New Europa. Not real rain. Earth couldn't risk uncontrolled weather anymore. This was engineered, chemical sterilized, and climate controlled. It cleaned the streets, scrubbed the air, washed away memory. But it didn't wash blood from hands. Commander Holt stood in a black coat on the rooftop of the Earth Command building, staring down at the city below. The skyline had changed. Cleaner, sharper, brutalist towers climbing high with surveillance drones circling like vultures. The people walked in lines, eyes lowered, purpose-driven, efficient, controlled, and afraid. Earth had become the very thing it once hated. General Maris approached slowly, his boots tapping against wet steel. "It's done," he said. "Iridia's population has been neutralized. The kill team failed, but orbital suppression finished the job." "Collateral?" "High." "How high?" 70,000. Holt didn't move. The numbers didn't matter anymore. "There were children there," he said flatly. "There were whispers there," Maris corrected. Holt didn't answer. They stood in the rain for a while. A silence not of peace, but exhaustion. Regret was a luxury Holt hadn't allowed himself. But doubt? Doubt was starting to infect the cracks. He remembered the first days of Earth's defiance, the fire of unity, the shared grief, the rage that bound them. Revenge was clean then. Purposeful. It had meaning. Now it felt like inertia. Kill or be forgotten. Silence dissent or let it spread. Power was a fire, and Earth kept pouring fuel just to keep it from going cold. "How many more worlds?" Holt finally asked. Maris didn't reply, because they both knew the answer. As many as it took to keep the myth alive. In the lower sectors of Earth, where light didn't reach and names were traded for codes, a rebel cell met in silence. No banners, no speeches, just a stolen drive and a screen flickering with the last recorded feed of Iridia. The man on screen was Ryland Hart. He stood in front of a burning settlement, the sky torn with static, the soil cracked by orbit strikes, and he looked directly into the camera. This is what Earth calls justice. A woman in the cell clenched her fists. They say he's mad, possessed. You see madness here? No one answered. Another whispered, he was their weapon once. And now? The woman smiled faintly. Now he's ours. The rebellion didn't spread through politics. Earth had burned those years ago. It spread through grief, through whispers, through questions no one was allowed to ask. Why did Earth silence the fringe records? Why did the Null Blade program go dark? Why did 70,000 people die on a planet with no fleet? The overseers tightened their grip. The AI surveillance systems flagged any unauthorized conversation with immediate protocol escalation. People disappeared. But for every voice that went silent, 3 more began to speak. And everywhere, Ryland's image appeared, in broken code on market screens, in corrupted military logs, in intercepted comms. I am not your enemy. I am your truth. Back on Bastion 1, Holt read the internal report with a cold pit in his stomach. Rebel activity detected in 31 Earth sectors. Civilian compliance rate down 12%. Overseer units in 3 major cities have gone offline. Cause, internal sabotage. Symbol left behind. R. He crushed the datapad in his hand. It's him, he muttered. Even dead, he's still here. Maris sat across from him in the ops chamber, face drawn. We don't even know what he is anymore. I can't track him. Quantum sensors can't pin him down. He's not moving through space. He's moving through consciousness. He's in our systems, Holt said. In our soldiers, our civilians. He's become an idea. Then we kill the idea. Holt turned toward the war map. We silence every voice that speaks his name. We erase every node that transmits his image. Full planetary blackouts if we have to. And what happens when we erase so much that Earth forgets who it is? Holt's voice cracked. Then we remind it. But reminders didn't work the way they used to. You can't enforce loyalty with boots forever. Fear sharpens, but it also fractures. And Earth had been cracking for years under the weight of its own power. In one of the higher-rank barracks, a young officer named Carvin sat staring at his screen, watching a replay of the Europa massacre footage Earth had long since banned. It was a hacked file, an unedited version. It showed the screams, the children, the Empire laughing. But the screen flickered halfway through, and Ryland's voice came over the audio. They used me. Then they feared me. Now they call me mad. But the ones who burned the world still command the fleet. Carvin leaned back in his chair, his hand trembling. He had believed in Earth. Now he wasn't sure what Earth believed in. In Section Black's deep chamber, Holt sat alone after the rest had left. He activated a sealed terminal. Confidential. Operation Revenant. Phase 0 archive. The old footage played. Ryland Hart sitting in the black pod before activation. No armor, no machine, just a man, hollow-eyed, dead-faced. Holt's own voice echoed from the audio log. Why are you doing this, Ryland? Ryland's reply came slow, quiet. Because I want them to feel what I felt. And because you won't stop them. But I will. And Holt had approved it. He watched the approval stamp burn into the screen like a brand. Authorization, Commander Holt. Now that ghost was haunting them all, In orbit, a signal broke through jamming nets Earth hadn't even detected yet. A planet called Virion 3, long abandoned, was lighting up with quantum codes. Not military, not empire, not Earth. Just a single repeating message. I will return. Not as a soldier, not as a god, but as your reckoning. Our Holt read it. He said nothing. But for the first time since Europa, he closed the war map. And he wept. Not for the dead, but because he finally understood the truth. They hadn't created a weapon. They had awakened a conscience. And that, in the end, was what Earth could never control. The war room of Bastion 1 used to be a place of certainty. Steel walls reinforced with triple-layer shielding. Command tables lit with holographic projections of distant systems. Dozens of uniformed officers taking orders with robotic precision. It was the mind of Earth's war machine, flawless and brutal. Now it felt like a tomb. Half the systems on the display blinked red. Rebel signals were surfacing in clusters, on Earth, Mars, the moons of Titan, even deep space colonies that once begged for protection. Commander Holt stood still as the map glitched, Ryland's symbol pulsing faintly over former strongholds. An R simple. Damning. Status? He asked coldly. General Maris didn't respond immediately. His jaw was tight, eyes sunken. He didn't look like a general anymore. He looked like a man standing at the edge of an empire collapsing. 17 planetary networks have gone dark in the last 72 hours, he finally said. Drone swarms sent to re-establish control were hijacked. Hacked? No. Maris turned. Redirected, reprogrammed. They didn't attack. They delivered food, power, medical aid, then vanished. Who's behind it? Maris gave him the look he already hated. You know, below Earth's upper colonies, a new faction had emerged. Unnamed, unseen, but everywhere. They didn't carry weapons in the traditional sense. They carried proof. Footage Earth buried, conversations redacted, experiment logs Holt himself had sealed. They didn't scream for revolution. They just asked questions Earth couldn't afford to answer. And wherever their messages reached, people listened. Soldiers deserted. Technicians sabotaged relays. Civilians offered safe houses. And Ryland Hart, or what he had become, was the name whispered in every dark corner as if it were both curse and salvation. He wasn't leading them. He was them. The fractured conscience of humanity made flesh. In a sealed chamber of Earth's Department of Memory Regulation, 2 black-suited agents reviewed an intercepted transmission from the outer colonies. A child, no older than 10, sitting on rubble, reciting something with his eyes closed. They called us enemies. We only asked for breath. They gave us fire. We learned to burn. The agents didn't speak. One pressed a button. The screen blinked out. No one logged the file. No one would remember. Back on Bastion 1, Maris finally broke the silence. There's a moment, he said, when a man realizes the monster he made was better than the monster he became. Holt didn't look at him. This is mutiny. It's awakening. No. Holt turned, voice rising. It's weakness wearing the skin of enlightenment. These colonies, these rebels, they don't want peace. They want control, just like the Empire did. And Ryland. Holt's face tightened. He's not human. He was. Not anymore. Maybe that's why they follow him, Maris whispered. Because he stopped lying to himself about what we became. That was the first time Holt struck him, hard. Knuckles cracked against cheekbone. Maris staggered but didn't fall. Holt breathed hard, hands trembling. He didn't even remember making a fist. He didn't apologize. He couldn't afford to. Earth declared Protocol Umbra the next day, a global information blackout. All external transmissions were severed. Civilian networks went dark. Personal devices became state property. Every image, every voice, every symbol associated with Ryland Hart was to be purged. No memory, no myth, no man, only control. But it was already too late, because the revolution wasn't coming through screens anymore. It was in blood. On the lunar outpost Selene 6, a full battalion of Earthshock troopers opened fire on a supply depot after intercepting rebel signals. They found no weapons, just food and sick children. 23 civilians dead before the cease order arrived. One of the Earthshock captains, Lieutenant Davrin, dropped his rifle after it was over. He removed his helmet and vomited into the corner. The corporal beside him whispered, "They weren't armed." Davrin looked around, saw corpses, soot, melted steel. He whispered Ryland's message to himself. "I did not come to save you. I came to show you the mirror." He didn't report back to Earth Command. He disappeared. And that night, Selene 6's defense grid failed, not from enemy attack, but internal sabotage. By morning, the Earth flag was gone, replaced by the symbol of a single burning R. Meanwhile, in the void between sectors, Ryland Hart drifted within the shell of what remained of the Idolon. It was no longer a weapon, no longer a parasite. It was a vessel now, a carrier of thought, of memory, of pain. He did not need food, nor sleep, nor breath. He only needed clarity. And as he floated among forgotten stars, he whispered the names of the dead. Each one echoed through the minds of those who followed him, and even those who didn't. It wasn't a speech, it was a list. Varus, Callan, Mira Holt, Lenore, Rain, Europa, Draxion, Iridia, Selene 6, names that no longer appeared on Earth records. Victims turned ghosts, stories Earth tried to erase. But he was those stories now. And for every name, a new voice rose, some to fight, some just to remember. But all to choose. On Earth, Holt watched one of the last functioning planetary feeds. A riot in Sector 4 turned massacre. Dozens shot in the streets, no weapons, just words. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Maris stood behind him, bruised but silent. "You still believe in him?" Holt asked. "In Ryland?" Numberinus Maris didn't answer, because the truth was now too loud to deny. They had become the new empire. But worse, because this time there was no galaxy left to blame. The next morning, Earth's skies flickered. A planet-wide glitch pulsed through every surveillance system, every satellite, every military HUD. Then, just for 2 seconds, every screen blinked white, and a phrase appeared in red. "What you kill doesn't stay dead. It becomes the thing your children worship." By nightfall, 28 more cities were in lockdown. The people weren't running anymore. They were organizing. And Ryland's name was no longer whispered. It was shouted. And Earth's soldiers, the ones who still followed orders, now had to decide. Pull the trigger, or put the gun down. The skies over Earth turned red before dawn, not from bombs, not from warships, not even from rebellion, but from the sun rising through the smoke of a burning world, a world that had ruled the stars, erased its enemies, and now stood on the edge of its own undoing. Cities burned in silence. Not one broadcast went live. The networks were gone. The AI satellites had gone quiet. The overseers, Earth's so-called guardians, had been pulled down by the very people they once patrolled. The black metal shells were now strung from towers like warning signs. "We are not afraid of you anymore." In the capital, once called New Europa, Commander Holt walked alone through the empty halls of Earth Command. No guards, no aides, no ceremony, only echoes. The massive flag of Earth, once a symbol of defiance and power, had been torn from the command tower, replaced by a crude banner of black cloth marked with a blood-red R. He didn't stop to look at it. He already knew who waited at the top. The command chamber was cold. Wind swept in through the shattered observation glass. The war table, the same one that launched 1,000 strikes, now lay broken, half-crushed beneath fallen steel. And at the edge of the platform, staring out at the horizon, stood the man who should have died long ago. No longer fully human, no longer Ryland Hart, but still unmistakably him. Holt stepped forward. His boots crunched over glass. His bones ached with every step. "You finally came back," he said. Ryland didn't turn. "I never left. You just stopped looking." "Is this it then? You came here to kill me?" "I could have done that years ago." Holt narrowed his eyes. "Then why didn't you?" Ryland turned. And for the first time, Holt saw what he truly was. Not a god, not a weapon, not a myth, but a man made of every death Earth refused to acknowledge. Skin like ash, eyes like cold iron, a voice that carried the silence of every name Earth deleted from its records. "I came here to bury you," Ryland said quietly. Holt laughed once. Bitter. Tired. "Then finish it." But Ryland didn't raise a hand, didn't draw a weapon. He stepped forward and held out a data chip. "What's this?" "Everything," Ryland said. "The truth. Europa, Draxion, Iron Howl, the Nullblades, the Fringe, the experiments you authorized, the rebels you erased, the innocents you incinerated to preserve the lie." Holt looked at the chip and didn't take it. "You think this fixes anything?" "No," Ryland said, "but it ends the illusion. I was trying to protect Earth. You were trying to protect yourself. They would have destroyed us, you know that. And now we've become them," Ryland said. "Only worse, because we justified it." Holt looked away. And in that moment he felt it all. Every soldier he ordered to die, every child he sacrificed in the name of containment. Every time he told himself that power was survival, that victory excused anything. And yet, somehow, in this final hour, he realized the truth. They hadn't won. They'd simply outlived their enemies. That wasn't strength. That was failure. Down below, across the world, the revolution reached its end, not in violence, but in silence. Cities lit up with a new signal. Every screen, every device, every public node broadcast one feed. Ryland Hart, standing atop Earth Command, facing his creator. Not yelling, not calling for blood, but offering the truth. And people listened. Not because they believed in him, but because they had already stopped believing in everything else. Holt finally took the chip. He turned it over in his hand. Small. Simple. But heavier than any bomb he'd ever dropped. "People will want vengeance," he said. "They already took it," Ryland answered, "but now they want answers." "And what if the truth breaks them?" "It'll set them free." "I don't believe that." Ryland stepped back. "You don't have to. You're not the future anymore." Holt looked up. For the first time in decades, he wasn't sure who he was without a war to fight, and that scared him more than Ryland ever had. "What happens now?" Ryland looked to the sky. "We give them a choice." Over the next 7 days, the galaxy watched as Earth unraveled. The files leaked, the hidden crimes exposed, the bodies unearthed, the mass graves catalogued, the civilians forgotten by war finally remembered. But instead of burning Earth to ash, the galaxy paused. Because vengeance had already been served, now came rebuilding, and for the first time in living memory, Earth asked for nothing. No reparations, no demands, no excuses, just silence, and the faintest whisper of apology. Commander Holt never stood trial. He walked away from Earth Command that day. Some say he died in the wastelands beyond Sector 9, Others say he went to the fringe, looking for peace where nothing lived. But a few believe he found it, and never came back. Ryland Hart vanished again. His symbol stopped appearing. His voice faded from the networks. Because he was never meant to rule, only to remind. And those he inspired? They started over. Not perfect, not pure, but free. And in time, the R stopped meaning Ryland. It meant reckoning. It meant remember. It meant resist, not against power, but against the lie that power justifies everything. And so it ended. Earth had banned the Empire, crossed the line, faced Oblivion. But in the end, what saved humanity wasn't war. It was the truth they tried to bury, and the man they couldn't kill.